Welcome to the video. We're discussing the BIGTREETECH TFT35 E3 V3.01 touchscreen. And man, you think if BIGTREETECH could have, they would have added some more letters and numbers to name that screen.
That's quite a mouthful.
I know. We're working on it.
This video will cover the basic installation of the TFT, how to load the firmware, and even customizing your firmware so that it loads custom pictures like your very own logo. So if this is your first time here, welcome, and go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss a video. Let's jump right in. The TFT has a touch mode which uses a 5-pin cable that will connect to the back of the screen as shown to your board. There's only one way to place the wire in the back of the screen, so you can't really mess that up. You can also put the screen in Marlin mode, and this will use two ribbon cables that connect to the EXP1 and EXP2 ports on the back of the screen to your EXP1 and EXP2 on your motherboard. EXP3 is only used when you have one single EXP connection on your motherboard. So now let's look at the board connections you need for the touch mode and the Marlin mode. On the BIGTREETECH SKR3 board, there is a separate TFT connection on the board, and when you flip to the back of the board, you will be able to determine where the reset pin is. Once you locate the reset pin, then this allows you to plug in the single wire of the TFT cable to this port, and you will plug in the other 4 pins normally. On the BIGTREETECH SKR Pro V1.2, you also have a separate TFT connection shown here on the board. Again, you could flip the board to find which pin is the reset pin, but this board actually has the markings on the front of the board for you, so this indicates where you're going to plug in that single wire of the TFT cable, and the other 4 pins will plug in next to it. Here is the EXP1 cable plugging into the EXP1 port on the board, and also EXP2 plugging into the EXP2 port on the motherboard. It's worth noting that the ribbon cables connecting to the motherboard might be backwards when you're installing to your board. One workaround is to remove this plastic lip on the plastic terminal casing if your wires are backwards. This way, once you remove the lip, you can flip the connection on your board and plug it in. Now we are ready to make some changes to the firmware. The latest version of Marlin can be found on the Marlin website by Googling Marlin firmware. After you get your Marlin firmware downloaded, we will now need to gather some more information by going to another website, the GitHub website. And we will need to gather some information depending on the screen and the board we are connecting to. In my example and in this video, we're going to be using the SKR Pro V1.2 and the TFT35 E3 V3.01. So now we're going to need to get some information. I'm going to scroll down to this chart. In the chart, we will see that for the TFT35 E3 V3.01 touchscreen, we should have a touch and a Marlin mode connection, which is what we saw when we were connecting the wires. Also using this chart, we will find the serial underscore port value is 1 for the board SKR Pro V1.2. We will also see that we need to set the serial underscore port 2 to a value of -1, and the baud rate is set to 115,200. We will also need to uncomment the line in the configurations folder so that we are able to use the Marlin mode of our controller. And this would be to uncomment the define rep wrap discount full graphics smart controller. Alrighty, now that we were able to figure out where to download the Marlin firmware that we're going to need for our 3D printer, I'm going to now take you through an example of setting up our Marlin firmware for our BIGTREETECH TFT35 E3 V3.01 on a BIGTREETECH SKR Pro V1.2 motherboard. Man, I really hope they work on that name.
Got it.
So the configuration.h folder that you're going to see on the left side once you open the folder into your Visual Studio editor has a lot of the basic settings we're going to need to edit for our 3D printer so that it can use this screen. Here's a quick checklist of the things you're going to want to search for by using the Control F command. You're going to want to locate the serial underscore port 2, the baud rate, define motherboard, EEPROM settings, SD support, nozzle park feature, Z-Min probe repeatability, and the G26 mesh validation. Now I'm going to find these settings in my configuration.h folder in Marlin. I'm going to start with the serial port. This port is used for the UBS connection to the board, and Marlin tells me that this can only be a -1 or a 0 value, so we're going to leave this to be -1. But the serial port 2 is assigned a value of 1, and that will be for my TFT screen. The baud rate is for the board to communicate with the screen, and I'll always start with 115,200 for the first time connecting. You can always adjust that later. Below is the define motherboard, and as you can see, double checking, we have selected the BIGTREETECH SKR Pro V1.2. So that is correct. Now go down and uncomment the EEPROM settings. This allows your printer to store the current settings in your EEPROM so that if you ever update your firmware or turn off your printer and turn it back on, these settings can be recalled and even updated to your printer storage. So these are very important. This allows you to use the M500, the M501, the M502, and the M503 G code commands. So using the control feature, search for SD support and uncomment this line so that you're able to use the SD card reader on the screen. Uncomment nozzle underscore park underscore feature. Now, to go into Marlin mode on your screen, you will need to define the controller. So if you want to do this and go into Marlin mode, you must uncomment the rep wrap discount underscore full graphics smart controller and not the rep wrap discount smart controller. Man, has this got to me in trouble before. Now we're going to turn our attention to the configuration underscore advanced.h tab, and there's going to be some features and settings in here that you're going to want to look for and uncomment. In the configuration firmware.advanced.h settings, you're going to want to look for these features. Baby stepping, auto report temperatures, auto report position, extend capabilities report, M115 geometry report, M114 detail, report fan change, long file name host support, auto report SD status, SD card connection LCD, serial float precision 4, host action commands, host prompt support, host status notifications, set progress manually. So now I'm going to go through the configuration_advanced.h settings, and I'm going to uncomment the things that I want, like the defined baby steppings, and some more settings like the auto report SD status, etc., etc. Compile your firmware after you've made the desired changes, and if it all goes well, you will receive a green success telling you that your firmware is good. Grab the firmware.bin that was generated and place it on the micro SD card, and we will use this to flash our control board. With the firmware.bin file that you just compiled, you're going to take that micro SD card and you're going to slide it into the slot of your control board with no power on right now. Once you put the micro SD card into the board, turn the power on and wait for the light to finish flashing. Once the light is done flashing, that means the firmware was installed onto your motherboard. So that's the last thing you have to do. We've just updated the firmware on our controller for our LCD screen. Alright, if you're still with me, the last step now is we're going to load firmware to the actual TFT screen because we're wanting to use the touch mode. So to do this, you're going to use the SD card reader on the screen and update firmware onto the TFT touch screen. Now you can see this is what my screen looked like before I updated the screen's firmware, but we can do better, and I'm going to show you how to load your own logo or image to the startup screen. So let's get into this. The TFT firmware is found on the GitHub website, and you're going to click on this button on the right, and you're going to download the zip folder for your firmware. There are going to be 3 things that you will need to put on your SD card, and all of these things are found on that zip folder that you just unpacked and downloaded, and what you're needing is going to depend on the screen that you have. So the first thing you're going to need is a pre-compiled firmware.bin file. You will also need a config.ini file, and you're going to need a copy the folder of the TFT you have, and this includes all of the pictures and menus for your screen. So let's go through an example and find these things and place them on the SD card. So when I downloaded and unzipped the firmware, I opened the folder over to this screen. From here, there are some instructions and links that are useful to look at. But for this tutorial, we're going to go straight to finding the items that we need. So I'm going to open the copy to SD card folder. And from here, there will be the 2 of the 3 things that I need. I will copy the config.ini over to my SD card from this location. I'm also going to take the firmware.bin from here too. I have a BIGTREETECH TFT35 V3, so I'm going to take this bin folder with the 27.x.bin on the end. That's going to be the precompiled firmware that I need, so I'm going to put that on my SD card. Now, I need to get the TFT35 folder that will contain all the menus and the pictures. This depends on the themes you want on your screen. There are a couple pre-configured themes that you can choose from, like the unified menu theme. That's what I always use, and there are others like the round miracle theme or some hybrid themes, depending on how crazy you want to get with your look. So I'm going to go ahead and copy over the bin folder that I want. This is the firmware, and I like to edit the config.ini file before I copy it over to my SD card. The reason is I just like to have a saved version of the changes I make, just in case I need to reference it again. For example, if you make any error in loading your settings on your touch screen, you don't have to flash the entire firmware again, meaning the bin folder. All you have to do is just drag over this config.ini file, and it will update your firmware to the settings you want. So the config.ini file is just the settings, like how many extruders you have on your printer, what colors you want for the fonts in the background. You make all those changes here in this file, and if any changes you need to make in the future, you will just edit the config.ini file and reload it on the SD card. So once I'm completely happy and satisfied with my config.ini file, I'm going to go ahead and copy it over to my SD card. So remember in the beginning of this video when I said you're going to want a custom logo or something to pop up when you first turn on your printer. So this can be done very easily by replacing the pictures or the BMP files in the TFT folder for the logo and logo portrait. In your favorite image creator software, we all have one, you will need to create 2 images. The first image I show is the logo portrait that I made, and your image must be 344 pixels by 504 pixels to fit the screen properly. The other image is the logo, which shows up on the start of the screen when you first turn on your 3D printer, and this image needs to have a size of 480 by 320 pixels. Once you have your images created, go to the TFT folder. Mine is the TFT35, and this folder contains all of the images used on the menu. Replace the logo.bmp and logo portrait.bmp with your images that you just created. Remember, we want the logo BMP to be the one that shows up on the screen when we first turn our 3D printer on. After you have replaced the images in this folder, copy it over to your SD card, and you will then have everything you need on your SD card, and you can load this card into your LCD screen to begin the updating process. After you turn on the power to your 3D printer, your screen will begin to update, and what seems like a ton of time passing by, your screen will then boot up, and I bet it will say printer not attached. That's no issue at all. Simply on the menu, go to the connection setting and select the correct baud rate. Your machine will connect with the board and you will be all done. Now, when you turn on your 3D printer, you will have one cool logo. So that's the process for installing your firmware onto your new LCD screen. See, it's not that painful, right? Thank you all for watching this video. Be sure to hit that like button and leave a comment. Check out the links which are listed in the description of this video. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit that notification bell so you'll see all of my videos coming out in the future. I thank you all for watching and I hope your 3D printing turns out awesome. Alright, I promise I'm gonna leave you alone. I promise. You know, but for the 0.0000001% of people who actually made it this far in my video, know why the heck I'm playing with LCD screens for a 3D printer, here's your hint. Episode 17.